Hey, good morning, guys. It is August 11th, and Chambers is in Second Kings, which is a really interesting. I like Second Kings. We've been with Elijah, through First Kings, and Elisha has entered the scene. Elisha is going to be his not predecessor, protege, I guess, um, and carry on the work of Elijah as a prophet to Israel. And this is the day that God's going to take Elijah from him. Elijah is one of the only a few people that we know of that entered into heaven or into the heavens. Um, the word heaven gets a little confusing. In all honesty, people say, "You want to go to heaven?" And when we talk about heaven, we actually are talking about the heavens because every time we see someone ascend or go to be with the Father, Jesus, Elijah, excuse me, Elijah, and others, it's always into the heavens. And so we say heaven, and we get a little confused as far as what eternity is going to be. But because there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, that means the two will become one. There'll be no more separation between the heavens and the earth, spiritual beings and earthly beings. Um, we'll all have glorified bodies. Anyway, it gets a little confusing. Anyway, so sorry, rabbit trail. Um, so Elijah's going to be taken up, and they know it. Everyone knows it, and so Elisha insists on staying with him. And Chambers is coming at this and saying, "Listen, it's okay to have someone who kind of guides you in the faith, leads you in the faith, shows you how to walk, but eventually you have to walk with God alone. There will come a time when you have to leave your Elijah, as Elisha does here, behind." And it says in 2 Kings 2:12, "And he saw him no more." That's when the chariot of fire comes down, sweeps up Elijah in a whirlwind, and Elisha is standing there. The cloak falls. He takes the cloak, and he starts to do the same work that Elijah did. But it's interesting that he actually receives, because Elijah promises it to him, a double portion of the blessing that Elijah has given, has received from the Lord. So um, Chambers challenges us here, and he says, sometimes we say, "I cannot go on without Elijah." God says you must. So without that person that kind of spurs me, pulls me, tugs at me, pokes at me, the person who is constantly showing me what it means to be a follower of Christ, and 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 there will come a time when that person will no longer be there poking, and you need to step up and follow God on our own. He says here in the second paragraph, "It is no use saying you cannot go like that. I can't go without Elijah." And I like what Elisha does immediately. They've crossed the Jordan. He immediately picks up the cloak and goes, and just almost as a test or a trial, and maybe as a demonstration of his faith, he picks up the cloak and strikes the water like Elijah had just done, and the Jordan separates right and left, and he walks across. It's no use saying, Chambers says here, you cannot go. This experience has come, and you must go. If you want to know whether God is the God you have faith to believe, him to be. Sorry, I'll read it again. If you want to know whether God is the God you have faith to believe him to be, then go through your Jordan alone. And so maybe that's even a kind of an indication that when a mentor of ours passes on or moves on or is no longer present, we need to almost immediately kind of challenge our own faith and say, okay, can I do the things that he was prompting me or leading me or allowing me to follow him as he did, or she, and do those things. I like what he says here about at verse 23 when he's talking about Bethel. He says, "At your wit's end," and at the beginning of God's wisdom. That phrase, "at your wit's end" and "at the beginning of God's wisdom." So many times I know for a fact that when I finally understood what God was doing, or maybe I'll say it this way, when I finally had an inkling at what God was doing, it's when I was at my wit's end, when I could no longer manipulate or put the pieces together, when all that started to fail, or at least was to the end, then I start to see God's plan. And Chambers says that here as well. And he encourages us at the end, determined to trust in God and do not look for Elijah anymore. And I would say Elijah is not only just a person. Maybe Elijah is a church that you used to have that was you've moved away from, or um, something that led and guided you, but is no longer. Um, Sometimes we have to move past the things that keep us in a static position and move on to something else that will cause us to grow. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's the Elijah some people are dealing with, is move past that point of static kind of. Um, I wouldn't say lethargy or being stuck, but maybe just moving on to that next place where God wants to take us. So anyway, hope that's an encouragement. You guys have an awesome day.